Good afternoon, everyone. I'd first like to thank you for coming to this presentation. My name is Alex Hanna. I'm one of the consultants that did some preliminary research on two different organizations, and we've applied some organizational behavior concepts and theories and principles to each organization to better understand how everything is at play. Let's just get right into it. The organizations that we chose to do research on and study were the Canadian Revenue Agency, better known as CRA, and Enterprise Rent-A-Car. A little bit of background information on both companies. The CRA is a federal department that's run by the Canadian government. It generally administers the tax laws for Canadians. It employs roughly 40,000 people across the nation, and it is headquartered in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Enterprise Rent-A-Car, it's actually owned by Enterprise Holdings, who is the parent company. The rental car company has locations across the globe. It employs more than 100,000 employees, and Enterprise is actually headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri, USA. Some of the organizational review for the CRA, the principles and topics that we chose to look at more in depth are the power in politics, conflict and negotiation, and leadership. We've applied both of these companies to these sets, and we're looking to get more in depth as we move throughout the presentation. Let's start off with the Canadian Revenue Agency. So from a power and politics perspective, the Canadian Revenue Agency really embodies the personal power attribute. Expert power is definitely required, as it is tax law that the CRA deals with. So you're going to have hired CPAs within the company. And it has a lot of referent power, and that is the collaboration and influence is extremely present within the organization, because there tends to be a lot of people that model themselves and their behaviors after some of the supervisors that are within the company. From a politics perspective, it's very informal. It's led, it direct, and it achieves. There's no concrete written instructions on how the politics are played, but it's an informal side that's definitely at play within the CRA. And the ability to form alliances and push good ideas forward through innovative thinking is definitely from the informal side of things, from the politics perspective. And it's also unofficial. So there's actually no directive or policy that's written about how to play the politic games within the CRA, but it's definitely present. And generally, employees learn the unofficial ways of how the politics work within CRA through experience and culture. Moving into Enterprise Rent-A-Car, the power and politics side of things, it's definitely positional power. Enterprise is a privately held company, and so you have a lot of employees that have to report directly to team supervisors or team leads or assistant branch managers and branch managers. So there's a lot of coercive power, and what this tends to do is it forces employees to perform at a higher level expectation, and they risk punishment if they don't live up to those things. One of the good sides, though, about Enterprise from the positional power perspective is how they employ a reward power perspective. And what this means is that the employers actually receive recognition through compensation, award recognitions, and accomplishments when they've met targets and exceeded targets. So this is a really beneficial thing that Enterprise employs from a positional power perspective. And the politics is definitely behind the scenes. So from a private company comparing it to a public or nonprofit or a government agency, private company definitely has more of a boys club with respect to how they go about doing their things. And this is very prevalent at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So behind the scenes politics, usually you try to sell ideas and influence the people that you're around, potentially for positional hires, promotions, not letting other people get ahead too fast. And this is, like I said, is much more present in private companies. So with conflict and negotiation, it's a dyadic conflict with the CRA. Conflict is usually between people. It's not so much within the groups or within different groups and teams. And it's usually based on lack of effort put forth. So people will get upset with other people that aren't really putting out, as they would say. And this usually is the conflict that is decided within the CRA. And some of the negotiation tactics that are used within the CRA is one of the main 5 points that I wanted to bring to attention is the clarification and justification stage. So normally there's not too much preparing to get into the negotiation, and then after the negotiation and clarification stages, the closure and implementation. It's more so just the clarification and justification. Usually it's just about establishing common ground going into it, and the communication tends to solve the issue. So maybe not understanding that the person's having some personal issues, understanding how to go about asking about what's happening, is there anything I can do, and being an effective listener more so than just being it's all about me and not about you. That never really goes anywhere. And I really wanted to talk about both this type of dyadic conflict as well as the clarification and justification stage of the negotiation. With Enterprise Rent-A-Car, the conflict is usually intergroup conflict. This conflict is between groups or teams. It's very present within different branches across cities, provinces, states, countries. And what that means is that certain branches will have conflicts with other branches because maybe there's situational where employees aren't showing up, or the branches are stealing fleet size, and I'll get more into this with the bargaining and problem solving. And so that's tend to be, it's more intergroup than dyadic. But with the negotiation stage, it's really interesting because between branches, the bargaining and problem solving is very, very important. And that's one of the 5 steps as well in negotiation. So it's more so giving up in order to receive. So most common on bargaining, fleet size, which is really, really present in Enterprise Rent-A-Car. So certain locations will get upset and there'll be conflict between groups and branches because certain branches potentially would have a bigger fleet size, and that one of the area managers, as discussed about the politics behind the scenes, is favoring one branch over another. So he might be moving fleet to that branch. So most common on bargaining, fleet size, and it's also about giving up in order to receive. And it's really, really, really interesting to dive deep into this and understand the dynamics between the conflict and how to solve that within a private company such as Enterprise Rent-A-Car. Leadership, such a crucial aspect of it. So between the leadership style and management, the difference to me in the CRA is more management. Management is administering and ensuring work gets done. Government runs more on management than leadership style. And the reason for that is because I think people tend to, in a government-run agency, pay more attention to the fact that within a government agency, you're there to do your work, you punch in, you punch out. Now, this is a generalization, this isn't happening for everybody, but in my experience, in my research, it's more of a management style over a leadership style. And one of the things I noticed was responsible leadership. So management, corporate interactions, manage corporate interaction and stakeholders' expectations. So with directors and director generals and potentially ADMs, who's assistant deputy ministers, they're there to really manage the expectation of the deputy minister's mandate as well as the minister that's an elected official. So that's kind of from a top down. It's generally more expected and executed in government, and the elected officials, as mentioned before, have to answer to taxpayers. So it's more so of a responsible leadership over an inspirational one. And I'm gonna really get into the inspirational one when we move into the enterprise. So the leadership, getting people to comprehend and believe. So it's enterprise, I find, is more of a leadership over so than a management perspective. Because the leadership perspective is getting people to comprehend and believe. So maybe setting a goal, rallying the troops and getting everyone on board to set pace to the new direction. And it's effective communication that brings out better sales and performance within enterprise. Moving into the inspirational leadership, it's so interesting because enterprise is a private company. Comparing it to the government, it's really unique on how they can extract better performance through inspirational leadership. It also tends to seek out the strengths of certain employees and applies those employees and strengths to appropriate direction. So if an employee is really, really good at customer service and empathy, they might then put that employee on more of a customer service frontline role. Whereas if the other person is really good at managing fleet and logistics of ensuring vehicles are in and vehicles are out, they might put them more of on a back end role. And that's how I found super interesting with regards to relationship and inspirational. So some of the strengths and weaknesses with the CRA that I noticed was, we'll start with the CRA. The strengths, Refer Power enables role models. So that's what they have. They have people that are there as role models, and informal politics pushes initiatives through, which is a super good political thing because at the end of the day, all government agencies answer to the taxpayers. Some of the weaknesses through the CRA, through the research, low output due to lack of reward power. There's not much recognition or rewards that go into government employees and how they interact and do their day-to-day work. And it would be really super beneficial if that was more present within the workforce. And the dyadic conflict present due to differences. I mean, if there's people that are having differences in the government, just sit down and talk with them, work it out, negotiate, bargain, find out what's happening. Moving on to the enterprise side of things, the strengths, negotiation tactics seem efficient. So how they negotiate, understanding fleet size, bringing fleets in, bringing fleets out, managing that negotiation and bargaining is super, super good within enterprise. And some of the leadership is so effective at extracting performance. Enterprise is always striving to be the best in customer service and ensuring that all their employees are super motivated. Some of the weaknesses that they see though, behind the scenes politics help with promotions. That shouldn't be the case, and coercive power provides stressful atmosphere. It's never fun going to work and being stressed out about being at work in case you might get punished. Some of the recommendations: introduce a reward power style for managers to recognize work well done and boost employee output. Provide team bonding events for employees, which will allow people to better understand differences, which can work through dyadic conflict. And understand what motivates employees and install a better way forward to ensure culture is positive for current and future staff. For enterprise, allow for employees to talk to upper management, which allows for more face time with hiring managers. Eliminate the boys club culture for all employees to feel included and have better representation regarding race, culture, age, and gender. And lastly, tone down the coercive power dynamics, which will eliminate the stressful atmosphere that is fostered throughout the company. Some of the points to consider: developing more robust leadership traits that will allow the organization to foster a healthy work environment. Implement continuous learning for employees and managers so they can synergize an organization for it to better meet the vision and mission statement of the company. And lastly, conflict and negotiating is crucial for any company to build a successful way forward that will ultimately include everyone's input in strengthening the trust around decision making. I'd like to open up the table for any questions, and again, I appreciate for you coming by.